I've transcribed a couple of songs from
Yeah.
the record, and
Yeah, man, that's so cool.
I don't know if I'm right, but it was certainly a great experience to, because when you transcribe and learn songs, you get so much closer, and there's so many cool and interesting things in the music. I don't know. Maybe we can talk about May later.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
love to.
how you constructed that song, and also there's some certain harmonic choices in there, which where I feel like, where do you get it from? I mean, how did you arrive at certain harmonic concepts, and yeah, anything you'd like to share,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Sometimes you have like snippets of a song idea, as you probably know, like that they'll just be sitting, in a corner of your mind
Yeah.
somewhere. And, and then when I start working on a record, like it sort of activates those ideas and the new ones. And so sometimes like songs on the record can be built partially from things that are super old.
Mm.
But in the case of May Later, I don't think I had been sitting on that progression for very long. I think maybe the melody, like having the melody start on that, like starting on that note, it might have been built from another idea that was like 15 years old, where that melody had that same shape, but
Yeah.
it was based on a seventh, like, so it's like there's this kind of like, oh, maybe I could superimpose
Mm.
this thing that I never did anything with, and it's like when you remove it from any music, that melody is pretty generic, it's like if
Mm.
you don't know, what it's weaving around, it's actually pretty familiar kind of American sounding.
Mm.
You could probably write a pretty convincing blues rock song with a
Right.
melody
Yeah.
like that. And that the as far as the music, at least like for the verse changes, I think what was leading me through that was probably the top voice of those changes and the kind of
Yeah.
ascending chromaticism of it,
Mm.
and maybe then building down from that, knowing where that melody is heading, trying to let the notes beneath it unfold in a way, not wanting to give what's expected, but to still be generous and still give something that, like, maybe is even more enjoyable because it's unexpected.
Mm.
um, Not rely on like a randomness, but just have something that's like, yes, what if it's this, but it also has
Mm.
this, and something like
I
that. So
love
I
that.
think I was searching for ways to have the chords follow that chromatic motion, but just continue to unfold, and like Russian doll style. Like
Mm.
you have one chord that resolves the last one, but poses another question. It poses another question.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you started out with the augmented thing, which is already like ambiguous and mysterious. But at first I listened to it, it was like, okay, augmented. I know that, and then you I think it's F and A flat, and then you have the A flat and resolve it then to G flat,
Mm-hmm.
which already took me out of A flat. I thought, okay, we're going to D flat or something, and then it goes to G flat, and then the next chord is exactly how you just said it, poses the next question, but it all makes sense within this grander scheme of G flat major, or I don't know. We resolve in D flat at the end.
D flat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you know like that you're starting on some version of the one, but because of the augmented nature of the chord, it also gives you this feeling that you're starting in the middle of the story.
Right.
Like it's a different it references another kind of familiar ascending chromatic thing, which is like, having an augmented fifth motion start to travel up until you get to a dominant seventh chord, like a Roy Orbison kind of, motion. So if you start at first base, on that run, you're still following the same motion, but it's just like it's just a different pattern, different game, and it feels a little like, I remember reading this thing somewhere, I don't know, in some kind of rudimentary theory book about how, like, if the melody of a song begins with a quarter note pickup, that the song naturally must end on beat 3, so as to kind of like complete the puzzle.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like, and which, just hearing myself say it, it's like immediately I want to find the exception to that rule.
Right, totally.
But I'm also kind of curious, like, okay, well, if that's well established, what are all the examples of it? So you start to kind of go through, nursery rhymes and things, and it's true. There is kind of a balance that occurs when, no matter where you choose to begin, if you acknowledge it with where you choose to arrive, you can create something that does feel quite satisfying still, even if it begins as something unfamiliar.
How is your relationship to written music?
It's very foreign to me. It's one of the things that I've constantly hoped that, like, at some point later in life, I'll, like, sit down and put in the time. I can talk about theory in relative terms, and I can follow a conversation about theory through most places. But when it gets into the written aspect of like just notation, it really does become like a different language for me that I'm very slow with.
But I mean, in the booklet of this album, I see the guys looking at sheet music. I think I even saw you holding sheet music. So I was wondering, like, it looks computer written. What is it, and how do you write down your songs, or do you write them down even?
Well, they're when communicating something with musicians, in a session, sometimes it's helpful to have just a lead sheet, a chord chart. In most cases, it's just blocked out with the chords, and it's kind of a diagram outlining time more than anything. That was my hang up when I was in jazz band in school, and, like, that was the perfect time to be practicing or developing my reading abilities. For the most part, it was lead sheets, it was chords and stuff. But when there was a song where, like, the teacher put down in front of me something with staff on it, I would be staring at it and, like, like as if it were like a word search, and then I'd finally, like, be like, okay, I think I see what it's saying. But then once I had it in my head, I was never actively reading it again. And so I was just thinking, like, what am I supposed to be doing with this here? And but we weren't working on anything that would have required me to have a better capability, sight reading capability. I had one like experience. So a childhood friend of mine, I think, was family friends with Stanley Clark. Wow. And so, like, one through like, probably years, would be like, my friend Kai, like, you gotta meet my friend Blake, again, my friend Blake. And Stanley finally be like, okay, I'll entertain it, and I went up to his house, and it was like an audition for something he was doing, maybe putting a band together, or I was going to do a record. And I was really unfamiliar with that, being in an audition for something, that's not, it's not typical for the type of music that I have been involved with for most of my life. So I'm in this like home studio in Topanga Canyon with Stanley Clarke without a real like sense of who he is and his music and what he's done. And so but with maybe a bit of like, whatever, it's whatever it's going to be, I can figure it out. I'll find kind of like the harmony in it. And I think he put down like either he put down a sheet of music in front of me and I was like, oh no, I can't do that. I don't do that. And he was like, okay. And he explained to me, it's basically, it's bass line, it's in 7, there's no drums, it's just bass and guitar. So it's like this bass line, it's in 7 and it goes here. And then at like bar 3, it goes. So I was really out of my depths and it felt so bad. And within like 5 minutes, he was like, okay, good. Like,
Thank
this
you.
Isn't. Yeah, exactly.
We'll call you.
Let's go into the house and we'll put on some tea. And he was really sweet about it. But it did make me realize there are conversations going on, musical conversations going on in this language, this vernacular that is just so above my grasp. And some of that music I really like, and some of it I really don't. And I think, do you have any experience with this? Like, I'm sure you do, because it's so prevalent. And it's something I find really interesting, and this like accepted kind of teenage idea that like you can either be really well trained and really knowledgeable in music theory, or you can be a creative artist, but like your brain only has room for so much of one without sacrificing some of the other. Like, you're going to go to school and you're going to learn theory and you're going to study music at the expense of your own innate artistry. That was like a real like a thing that I had heard or had surmised as a teenager, and made me think, well, I definitely don't want to go to music school if that's God forbid I grew up to be a session musician. I wanted to be in a band. And as I got older, I just feel like it's just such bullshit. And the music that I am gravitating towards more and more, at my age is really informed by the study of music and like transcribing. You're talking about transcribing other people's music. Like I'm so envious of that discipline, and that relationship with writing anything down. Because I do think it's valuable.
It is valuable, but it's also just another way another way to look at it, because I'm sure you learn a lot of songs by other people, or learn the music of other people, or take the aspects that interest you and try to look at them closely, which is the same thing. I'm just writing it down. But, I think it's cool to write it down. But then again, I was looking at how rhythmically nuanced you sing the melodies. I was like, there's no way it's going to be written down how I write it down now. So I can maybe play it with the band once or something, because you sing it with every verse, or with every another chorus, you sing it different. You sing it differently. It's so interesting. And, I want to write this down now. I want to write this down, but it becomes like, who's going to read this? I found it interesting to get as close to how you sang it, but there was a moment where it's like, I don't know if he writes it down like this,
Well, that's also an interesting, like the fact that there is room for so much interpretation in notation, that it's like it's taking this thing that's kind of that appears to be so academic, or like so sort of clinical, you know. Like to transcribe something, it feels like it could be taken as like writing a police report about something where you're like, it does this, then it does this, then it does this. But the fact that it can be open to such that it's a translation, that it is like reading a translated poem or something from another language is so cool. I think the phrasing of how people sing things is something. Right now, I'm in the middle of working on a music for a television show. That's sort of it's not the score of the show, but the story is about a fictional band in the 70s. And so I'm writing all this music. This is the project that I reached out to Chris Wiseman about. And
I talked to him about it a little bit.
Yeah. So, okay. So, so it's like the part of the process with this show has been taking things that I've written and I've sung demos of, and starting to have other singers perform this music. And when you find singers who hear a melody or read a lyric and interpret it and have such they're incredible singers, but they each have their own sort of like personal way of hearing something. And so when they go to try to sing it, I can hear how it's just slightly different, and it's like,
sure,
okay, well, this one word, there's actually like this little dip in this thing, and you start to realize details in something that you didn't put in there knowing they were details. You just notice them when they don't happen, when they're gone, or when somebody else is performing it without those details. And I think there's a lesson probably to be learned in there with regard to like having that knee-jerk reaction to like, oh, it's different, and trying to like in that moment actively move past it and just hear it and be able to like live with it, and accept it for being something unique to somebody else,
Right. It comes back to expectations also, because if you're listening in expectational, I don't know if that's the word, but in a, manner, immediately there's the possibility of connecting it to the judging mode, because like, it's not like I would have thought it's going to be or how it should be. That can be connotated in a negative way easily, I think.
Yeah.
But when you just take it in how it is, there's the possibility of going, oh, that's the way to do it, or and didn't think of that,
Yeah, it's a really like, what's a good word? It's a noble thing to aspire to be a listener that's that open, or just to kind of quell the critic. I'm a really judgmental listener, and I have really strong opinions.
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is I'm scrutinizing something either for intent or for for trying to get to kind of like the crux of what's interesting about, if I'm like, it depends on, I guess, the process of listening. Like sometimes it's like, okay, people are like, oh, have you heard this record or whatever? And for whatever reason, when music arrives like that, the little devil on my shoulder is just like, no, I haven't heard it. I'm probably not going to like it. Like there's this like there is this like kind of asshole-ish, and part of it's that like that protection thing, you know, like wanting to protect what's coming in and like protect what has even an opportunity to influence you. But another part of it is like there's a side of me that's a listener and like an enjoyer of music and art, and there's another side of me that's a maker. And like if and I know how easy it is for the side of me that's a maker to just be led by the side of me that's a lover of music. And I don't always want that. Like I've done that in the past, and like done it actively, like knowing that that's what I was doing. Like, you know, when you write songs, you're like, I kind of want this to be, or I really want this to be this kind of song, you know, or this kind of record. And that's great while it's happening. And it'll never stop happening for me, I'm sure. But I go back and hear that years later, and I'm like, oh, that's all that was, you know. Like I wish I would have waited a year to where I was no longer so strongly influenced by that music that was inspiring that, and could have digested it a little bit more and turned it into something else.
I think also all we want is listen to good music as musicians, you know. I think that's also part of why we do it, because we got addicted to a certain sound or a certain feeling that certain sounds made us feel. And like, I want to do that too, but it sounds like shit when I do it. I need to get better, you know, and I want to get closer to, you know, it's either like listening to the music on a record or just trying to do it yourself, you know.
Yeah, there's a certain feeling of wearing a costume for a little while you're you know, when you're in love with something new, and trying to work out what it is that's so special about it, you know. And it's definitely, I remember Larry telling me one time that Paul Bley came to see him. Did he tell you this story in the interview?
I think so, yeah.
And he said something along the lines of like, it was really good, you know, you just need to throw out all your records.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He told me the same thing.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, what a thrilling dig on somebody, you know, like,
yeah,
it's this thing where you're like, in one hand, it's sort of like, well, fuck you. But on the other hand, it's like, oh, wow, I wonder what'll happen if I do that. You know, like what I would come up with if, you know, if I didn't have any devices of other people's like influences or mechanisms.
But I also felt like this criticism, it was full of love also, because there's somebody who knows a lot of music and he can appreciate that somebody else loves a lot of music. Right. And therefore he connects with him by saying, throw away all your records. I heard that you know all this stuff. This is great. But you know, that's also engaging. I want to hear you, you know, I want to hear more you.
Yeah. It was a very poetic way of basically saying like, all the things you love of other people's, I can hear evidently in your playing. So it's like, take the things you love and turn them, you know, shake them up a bit and turn them upside down and do things to them, you know, so that you're furthering the conversation, you know, and rather than retelling something. It's something I think about a lot, you know, and maybe part of why it takes so long between records to like to think of a reason to make it, you know, like what the purpose of another record would be, you know. It used to just be like because I'm a slow writer, but now that I'm, you know, I've got all these wonderful people that I could collaborate with, like I could make records sooner. I could do them, more quickly, but it would feel unfamiliar to me to like begin before having a sense of like, well, this is the type of record I would like to hear, right now as a listener. So that's what I'll set out to make. That's a harder thing to come by, I think.
Yeah.
Than songs.
How do you relate this to Chris Weisman and his work ethic and work flow?
Oh man, I mean, he's such a mystery to me. He's so prolific. And in the way that like the only way I can understand a person's ability to sit down and just have the kind of faucet, like in songs come out of the faucet, words and things like, it's like that. I know I can sit down with an instrument, with a guitar, and like play something new, not know where that's not have a sense of like where it's coming from, just like go from one note to the next, and like just follow it. But to be able to do that with words is like it's like watching somebody able to breathe underwater. I never understood how writers can do that. So he's got a really special set of skills, but also like tastes, like what types of words he gravitates towards and what types of harmony and choices, and like kind of it's almost like there's a philosophy there, where he presents bitterness and things that are a little sour, harmonically and dissonant, and how he does it in such a way to where it still feels really elegant to people, whether they realize what's going on, like whether they're hip to the theory of it or totally not, just as a listener hearing it and going like, I like that. That's interesting. That's unique. It's a real, nobody that I know personally is doing quite what he does.
Totally. He told me that you asked him to come up with some songs also for this imaginary band in the 70s. And he said, like, I sent him like 30 songs already, something like that.
Yeah.
And then he says, then you do your spin on them. And that's the moment where I was like, okay, I want to know more, but I couldn't ask him more because it's like, I think that's your story to tell. So if you want to share some of that process, but how do you approach taking somebody else's music and then doing whatever with it? Because I haven't heard it yet. So,
well, it's definitely, it's something unique to this project. I've never done anything like that before. I mean, I've collaborated on songs with people, but in the case of this show, what happened was it's all based on a book, Daisy Jones and the Six. And in the book, there's references to songs and lyrics and stuff like that. But in the TV show, we're not really beholden to all of those lyrics. I'm trying to make it really feel like an album that existed or could have existed, or a band that could have existed, and not quite as referential to other bands that did exist in real life as maybe certain characters in the book are, like it's pretty, I think the most common connection people would draw from the story is Fleetwood Mac. But in a lot of ways, it's the situation is a little more like Nico joining the Velvet Underground, because it's this like kind of blues based, kind of like a Peter Green, at least how I envision it, like a Peter Green era Fleetwood Mac, a blues rock band, and then the introduction of this other artist, this other voice, literally and figuratively, of the female comes in, and it kind of turns the band into something totally new.
That's Daisy.
That's Daisy, yeah. So I was talking to Chris about this project, and basically said, it's entering into a world of film trying to depict music and the world of music, which historically has never ended well. Like,
Yeah.
there's a good chance it's going to be what it's going to be. This was like a year and a half ago, not really, before anything had really started. And I said, but I have a lot of control over the music, I think. And so I'm going to really try to make it as good as I can on that front. And so Chris, like that, the weekend after our initial conversation, I think he like got the book and read it, which when I found out, I was sort of like, oh no, like I wonder if because he sent sent songs based off of those original lyric ideas in the book. Like he would take certain song titles and I was thinking like, oh no, maybe I didn't tell him that like the songs don't have to be literal. So he sent stuff over, and like it was beautiful, like some of these lyrics that from the book, I was thinking like, well, I don't know how to turn that into a good song. He really got inside of and made them special. And some of the stuff he sent harmonically was probably too advanced or even too exploratory for the nature of the band in this story, in this book. But what he was doing was he was sending me each idea in 3 separate emails. He would send his recording of the idea, his demo, and then he would send the lyrics, and then he would send the like he would notate the song in some way, whether it would be just a chord chart or he has this really beautiful way of writing down his ideas, of like transcribing his own music. It's somewhere between like what a really good guitar teacher would give you when you're like a beginner, and the graphics on the Voyager gold disc, where it's like, this is a universally legible document, that if aliens happened upon it, they would be able to go, oh, I see what you're saying here. It's really beautiful. And so sometimes I would get the idea late at night, and I'd just be in bed and hear the like ping ping ping, and I would open up the lyrics before hearing the music and kind of like look and see what he had done with those, and then like check out the music and be like, oh man, this is way out there, but these lyrics are really cool. So then I would need to go in the next day and just try to write something with the lyrics. And that was I think what I was most excited to send to him, and nervous because I in some ways felt like I was dismantling this thing that was really beautiful, that he had written and he had made, and was hoping that that the thing that it had turned into would be something that he saw some value in, and for the most part, I think like he was able to see like why things changed in the ways and went, the ways that they did, and we find a lot of commonality in terms of like the music from that era that we like and are trying to subvert, into this TV show and stuff. So like where their set of references might have ended at like Fleetwood Mac and Springsteen or something, we're thinking, okay, we can also maybe get some like Todd Rundgren in there and maybe a little like Terry Reid or like Free or something, some of these like more athletic singers and things like that. So it's been a really cool way to enter into that that relationship, but that's also like a great excuse to just meet the guy and befriend him and be able to work on music outside of that project as well, where there are less like ground rules and fewer limitations.
When I listened to the new one, I felt like, I don't know if I'm stepping on your toes with this, but I felt like you couldn't have done the latest one, Mutable Set, without having done Look.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't,
Yeah, sure.
So
it's true.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely things that occur in the context of making a soundscape record that are like that you allow yourself to do that. Then maybe once you've allowed yourself to do them there, you're like, well, I mean, what's the big deal? It doesn't feel like anything on Mutable Set is like that daring, because it's like it's not like those decisions aren't it's not like anything that hasn't been done before. Like long songs or things that kind of like have unexpected chords or whatever. Like, it doesn't feel, it's not like protest music where like I'm putting my neck out on the line. Somebody might come knock on the door and be like, there were a lot of augmented chords on that record, young man. Like, let's
show your license.
Like, what's gonna happen? Nobody's gonna take my some sort of like success of being a solo artist away from me. I don't have it, so it's wonderful to exist in this kind of world of not having the pressures of expectation of how something's going to perform or supposed to perform,
Yeah. I want to talk to you about, I really feel like your guitar playing has a very deep orchestral quality in terms of all the different parameters of the music, but also the different, the bass, the tenor, the soprano, whatever, alto.
Oh, cool.
Like, it's so layered and so nuanced and has so many dynamics. I mean, how you play with dynamics. Sometimes when I listen to you play, I feel like you don't need anybody around you. You're doing it all on your own. Of course, it's great to play with the band, and you sound great with the people you surround yourself with. But still, there's moments where I feel like everything is there. I mean, you're playing bass for yourself. You're playing drums for yourself. I mean, later those chords, how you strum them. I mean, that's drums. It's also how you record them, but that's the drum part of it, or how you play. If I'm on Worthy, I mean, the bass motion of that. That's when I saw you play it first. I was like, oh, that's all him. On the record, it sounds like it might be somebody else there too, but I'm wondering how you arrived at that sense of orchestral approach to an instrument like that, and finding so many different colors in it.
I think it's one of the few wonderful things about guitar. Like that you do have an access to, like, you can span a certain length of intervals, with one hand. Like there sometimes it's kind of like it gets depressing, like to hear the same set of boxes. And I bet everybody hears this on their own like respective instrument, but like with guitar, it's so often approached in like these shapes, by like the pentatonic boxes or scales and chord voicings and stuff. But because there's that homogeneity, when there are players like Michael Hedges, or Charlie Hunter, lots of Jim Hall. Like there are people who unlock a certain register or a certain way of using the instrument to that multi-purpose effect of like having drums and counterpoint and things going on at the same time. That's such a magic trick. It's such like a such a mysterious thing. Like, how are they doing that? You know, and that was something I gravitated towards when I was after the initial lure of like playing fast and loud, kind of like wore off. It was like, oh, okay, how are these guys doing this? You know, and also like being able to satisfy. Like if you're listening to a record and you're falling in love with like how rhythm section is playing, you know, with each other. Like if you're focusing on like Sly and the Family Stone or something like that. If you just play the guitar part, you're not really getting the fix of what's happening with that music, you know? So in order to understand sometimes what's taking place in an arrangement, I've just naturally tried to figure out a way of hearing, you know, those things happen at the same time, the bass movement or something like that. And then tunings, like you can like imagine if you had a piano that you could just reach over and like, you know, change the tuning of. It'd be I think there's a lot of like exploration that can happen on the guitar as soon as you start to get bored with it by just coming up with a tuning, you know, or putting in a different register. And the fact that baritone guitar, you can play some chords on that you probably wouldn't want to hear on bass, you know, but that you can never get the same kind of power from on a guitar in standard tuning, you know, like it's just there's ways of taking the way guitar is laid out, and the fact that that's familiar to me, being able to move that into a different register as easily as just having a guitar and that's tuned in that. It's like being able to play a different instrument all of a sudden, you know, like horn players have to put in so much time to access a different register, you know, and it's I'm lucky in that way that guitar makes it so easy.
I wonder how long does a record like Mutable Set take for you to do? I mean, the writing process is one thing, but I suppose, I mean, a song like a window facing a window seems like you just played it together. It seems very, you know, organic, seems very acoustic, you know, not a lot of work done in afterwards or something. But other songs with so many layers on them, and you know, I'm wondering how long the process for some of the songs. Maybe you can compare a little bit.
Yeah. Each one was pretty unique. It's not the kind of record where we moved through. You know, we just kind of like tracked a song and then moved on to the next song kind of thing. It was built more from, there'd be like a performance, either just a solo performance from me that had the vocal and some accompaniment, whether it was most of the, maybe half and half actually. Like I played piano on this record because I did a lot of the writing on piano, and I'm not a very consistent piano player, reliable piano player, but some of the songs, like, it took longer, you know, to try to get the performance playing piano and singing. And then other ones, you know, it was just guitar and vocal. And then I would the songs that are layered, it would be built on that, you know. The ones that were performed live. Some of those were like I had tracked them earlier in the process of making the record, and then as the record went on, kind of was listening to those and being like, yeah, this doesn't feel quite like quite right, you know. And then towards the end of the process of the kind of layering songs, I'd found this groove with Sam Gindel and Aaron Embry, who had come in to participate in the layering process, like you know, piano and sax. And I was thinking, like, what if we just tried to do these songs as a trio, track them live as a trio, and how would we do that if this was the band? You know, because both those guys are so sympathetic to a song, and getting inside of a song and contributing to it from that standpoint. So Money is the One True God. Never Forever. Window Facing a Window. Maybe one or two others, like we did in like 2 days, 3 days. We were just like, that was the most sort of like live part of the record. Not the only live part, but in terms of what is on the record, what ended up on the record. And then other stuff is definitely more constructed.
A Window Facing a Window. It's such an incredible song, man. I always hear, I love your singing on it, but I also felt like Billie Holiday could have sung this song.
It has a standard. I mean? It definitely has like a standards vibe. The main theme of that song was something that came from when I was in jazz band in high school. I don't know if you know this. I've told this story before, but like I had this like memory of a song we played in jazz band that was really hard to figure out, like I didn't remember the name of the song. I just knew that I had learned it as a teenager, and I was playing the song from memory for all my friends who are like jazz guys. What song is this? What is it? Nobody could remember what it was. And it's just like, it's not. Is it possible that I wrote this and like just had some weird dream of, you know, like where it came from? There's no way. And I finally reconnected with this incredible musician who was the drummer in jazz band that I went to high school with. His name's Lewis Cole. And I reached out, and Lewis's father was like the band leader. This was actually an extracurricular jazz band. And I was like, what is this tune? You know, we played this, you know, with your dad. What was this tune? He's like, oh yeah, that's El Ciego. You know, it's on a Charlie Hayden record. So finally I went and listened to it. I was like, oh, this is it. This is where this came from. But it's a cover. You know, it's like it was a standard in the 60s. It was written in the 60s. It's like a Spanish language. It's like a Mexican ballad pop song. And so it's a total co-write. But I had written the lyrics for the song for Window Facing Window to this melody, you know, and I didn't remember the beat section from the jazz band or whatever. So I was just like, okay, well, if I were writing this song, it would go here, you know. All based on like if I were further continuing this idea, you know, the melody and the vibe of it, you know, the standards vibe of it. So I've never had an experience like that, you know, like it's like adding on to a building, you know, 100-year-old building or something, or 60-year-old building.
That's cool. Um, Yesterday, I transcribed Far Sickness, and I think it says that you wrote it together with Gabriel Kahane.
Yeah.
Is that correct? I was wondering what your process is or was with this song, writing together with somebody like that, and how you guys constructed it.
The sort of the first verse and maybe the last verse, I think, most closely resemble harmonically what I had written in how the progression of the song that I was writing. And it was definitely, it was a piano song, and it was beyond my reach to play. Like when I was writing it, when I was writing all the piano stuff on that record, it was really slow because I would like accidentally hit a certain chord and be like, oh, that's, that's cool. But then I like I couldn't move my hands. I was like, okay, if I pick up my hand to grab a pencil, I'm not going to be able to remember what this is. Yeah. So there were a lot of chords in Far Sickness that even how I had written it, I couldn't quite navigate and couldn't play in time. So I knew I wanted to have like somebody like Gabe around for the recording of it, and I sent him like an outline of it, and just said, if you hear anything, by all means. And so he did all these great reharmonizations around the melody, and which allowed the song to just feel more like a journey, or like a train of thought, which is what it is, from a lyric standpoint. He really underscored that part of it, that kind of like contemplative part of it. Nice.
It really adds on top of each other. I mean, as you said, it's a journey. Some things are repeated, but it never feels like a repetition. I could have never put a repeating sign somewhere, That's my transcription thought, because no, it's different. I have to write it down. It is different. It's meant like that. Even in the end, where it goes like the. And then my favorite is
yeah.
What a song!
I mean, that's Gabe. That's his voice leading, and really thinking about where each internal melody is heading, rather than the way that I approach piano, especially in a piano player my piano tuner pointed this out to me. Like a guitar player sits down at the piano and plays chords, and I do, that is exactly, that's the reality. And then when real players like Gabe and yourself, when you're playing, you actually do hear distinct voices that are just occurring at the same time. And so he really flushed out the stuff that he contributed to that song. He really flushed out a style of piano playing that's unique to the record. It doesn't. There's a lot of piano on the record, but not like that. It's never utilized like that anywhere else in the record. That's him.
Yeah. How about Summer? I mean, who's playing piano on Summer all over again?
That's me.
That's you. Beautiful voicings also. I mean,
thank you.
There's some great stuff in there. Whenever there's the flat 5, it's very specific, but I think there's an A flat minor, and then you go for the flat 5, half diminished sound. That always takes me like somewhere completely different. It's like always like what? I know it by heart, but it's always unexpected. And I love this quality in music. If there's something that sounds like it's from, you know, could have been there forever, but also comes in the moment. I don't know how to put it into words, but it's like timeless. Maybe is a good word. And I'm always struck by it, like always unexpected. Although I know what it is, you know?
Right? Yeah, you know it's coming, but it does a certain thing. I think that moment, if I know the one you're talking about, it's to me, it's like it underscores something that's not conveyed in just the lyric or that chord alone. Like it's the, let's see, because the only flat 5 I can remember is the that moment.
That's another part I meant. I meant something different. I think it's
Oh yeah.
You know, that's what I meant. Yeah.
So that one?
It's a different it's a different moment. It's a different moment. I don't know where exactly we are, but I think it's like and then it's something in between, you know, something in between. And that's another favorite part of mine with the E chord.
The E chord. Yeah. Yeah. When I get to that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful too.
I wonder if I'm not even remembering the part of the song because it could, oh. Is it the E flat? There's not that much in the song. I don't even. Maybe
it's just the thing is it's just a passing note. It's a passing note. Yeah. It's a passing note, and
I'll have to listen for it. When you hear it, let me know what chord it is. I'll put it in there. I'll give you credit.
Sure.
But there's things in the lyric that there's things that are not in the lyric that are supposed to be, you know, and like things that are supposed to be covered in the song.
So that can't be covered with the lyrics, you mean? That has to be with. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Because it's just by design. Like it's supposed to be. It's supposed to kind of be like how you talk about something with a small child, you know, like where you want to cover a topic that can be, you know, pretty terrifying in a way that's like approachable. And there's some stuff that's not said explicitly in it, like the game is to try to like suggest it, you know, musically.
That's great. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about your experience of working with Jim Keltner and what you've learned from him, what your relationship is, and how you think he's approaching maybe musical settings or recording settings. I'm curious.
I think, I mean, like his reputation precedes him in terms of like he's universally respected and loved and like one of the most well documented musicians, you know, like one of the most prolific, well recorded people I know, and so I think there's probably maybe a bit of a hang up, you know, with somebody who's played so marvelously on so many recordings. It's impossible to enter into a situation without an expectation of what you're going to do. And like, hope. There's like there's probably like a lot of well-meaning hope of like what you're going to get from Jim on a session, and it's so beautiful to have, again, those expectations challenged, and to sort of like see that he still has a way of just responding to the moment, rather than the like refusing to just try to figure out what the person is expecting him to play. Like there was almost like when we before our first session together, there was almost like certain like warnings. Like people were like, "Now here's the thing, you're not gonna get like the same thing from him twice or whatever." Like, and also like as soon as you tell him what to play, it's like all bets are off, and like just this like it's unwarranted advice that was like almost scary. And then we get together and I was like, what are you talking about? Like we were like sitting down, like talking about like that picture you were referencing or whatever, where like I've got like a lead sheet or something and we're looking at it and stuff. It was like, that was like a big no-no, to like, according to like the sort of like the stories of like working with him where he does this thing and and then you're like, that's great, do that again. And like I get it, but every musician is like that. Everybody that I know is the same way. And the reality is like you want him to do the thing that nobody would ever think to say they want from drums on the song. We did this one pop-up show one time, a night, and the band was I was doing these nights with Pino Palladino and Larry, and we'd have a different drummer, and they were like weekly gigs. We did one month. It was residency at a friend of mine's venue. And
did you record them?
Yeah, they were recorded. In fact, my friend just dropped the hard drive off of the recordings yesterday. And one night we did a sleepwalk, and Jim was playing the song like totally upside down. Like he was hearing, like I don't know what he heard. Maybe the count, maybe there was a count, maybe there wasn't. And like, maybe he just got started upside down, but continued. And we were like, it was like a psychedelic experience. I think he was playing it in like 4, and it was and it like that song's in 6, and he's playing it in like 4, but like the snare on the 1. And we were just like all looking around. And Jim was just in it, in his world, like hearing it, and that's the kind of thing where if you have an expectation to, like it, or I guess you'd say like if you can't roll with like having your expectation immediately like challenged and like demolished, it could be really scary. It could be really frightening. But like what a thrilling, what a moment. I can't even remember how that song how it lived. Like how it survived to the end. How we made it through. But he's I've heard it said, I think maybe Fiona Apple said like he's the life giver. Like he'll come in, you have this song, it exists, but it doesn't live yet. Like it hasn't been born. And so he has like a way of turning it into a living thing. That's so exciting. It's so thrilling.
Beautiful.
But I hope that like that offers something that like hasn't been talked about, like you know, to like great ends already about Jim. I mean, he's like, everybody who knows him loves him and has played with him loves him, and he has um, such a unique voice on the instrument. Um, and I've also noticed that he the way he hits, the way he like strikes the drum, it's not like I don't associate his playing with like a stick going towards the drum so much as like the recoil coming back, and it's
Right.
sort of like he's pulling a sound from the head of the drum when he hits. And I wonder how much of that it has to do with the, like, you know, he's doing the sticks with shakers on them and stuff, you know, to where that recoil has to be
it's part of the sound,
part of the in time, you know, like that the timing of that is so intentional. If that just became part of the technique, you know, when he's not playing with shakers, to where like he just his it's like embouchure for a drummer, you know, like the sound is so, there's nobody that can make a drum make a room resonate like that. Like I've sat down at his drums and like hit him and I'm like,
oh yeah,
what the fuck like it doesn't sound anything like this. So he's a real magician in that way.
Did he give you any kind of advice or any notes that are still useful for you, or is he not giving out stuff like that?
The fact that he is involved in the music, that we've been involved in the music together, that we have been, like the fact that he's played on some of my music, the fact, like, just being it's so motivational. It's such a reassuring, like it's such a heavy compliment, you know,
right?
To just have done that, like, and had him involved in that stuff, was sort of like, in a way, it felt like advice, you know, or just encouragement, you know. And one of the most valuable experiences about that second record for me was just like realizing that you can make an album and have certain people that you're really focused on satisfying. Like you can have like 4 or 5 people in mind who are like, I'm making this record for them. And then at the end of it, if like you can share it with those people and they get it, that's all, then you can put it to bed. Like it doesn't matter who else likes the record. It doesn't matter who doesn't like the record, you know. Like you actually like kind of can't count any of it. You can't add up the people that dig it. You can't add up the people that don't. You have to just like kind of get up, walk away from it after. And Jim is one of those people for me, you know. On that record, I was really, really nervous about playing with him because I'd had an experience with him years before on a session after growing up idolizing his feel and his playing on records. I had an experience where the first time I got to play with him, I felt a little like I was trying to participate in his pocket too much, and it was just fighting. It was like adding like salt and soy sauce to something. You're like, you're not supposed to do that. And so I had to sort of like rethink like what I would do if I ever had the chance again, to play with him. And and I just knew I knew it didn't work, but I didn't know like what I could offer, what I could bring to the table, to hang with him. And so that record was an opportunity to do that again. And the first thing that we did was Shed Your Head. That was like day one of Heigh Ho. And that jam was just kind of the getting to re-meet, and like talk.
It's beautiful. That's another one of those letting go moments, or those, letting something happen that I really like in your music, that you allow them in there or go for them. It's just a beautiful moment. And also, like, this could take 20 minutes, it could take 6 minutes. I'm down for the ride, just I love that.
Yeah, not up to me.
Yep. Hey man, thank you.
Pablo,
thank you for doing
so
this.
much. I hope it was enjoyable and
Totally.
and will be for your listeners. Hey, how you been?
Yeah. Where did we end?
I have no idea. It feels like months ago that we did that.
It was.
Was it actually? Okay, then I'm not crazy.
I think it was November.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Wow, crazy. That's great.
So a month in Corona time is like,
yeah,
something
it's like
else.
It's like 7 dog years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks for sending me the music.
Yeah, man, a pleasure.
The thing was, you dropped that first single, and I was like, I need to talk to him again. We need to talk this through because, or I need to. I felt like when we would release this interview, and we wouldn't have talked about what you guys just did there, it would feel weird. Since you sent the music, it was on repeat. My family had to listen to it. My kids were singing along already and dancing to it.
Wow.
So yeah, and it was really because it's also the length, like 30 minutes. I don't know about you, but for me, a length like that makes me want to play it again immediately after that.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think there's probably like, we were wondering if we needed to come up with more material, just because 30 minutes for an album is sort of cutting it close.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like every time we got to the end of listening to that much, as much music as we had on there, that it felt like a good amount, like a complete cycle. But I'm glad that it's a cool listening experience in that way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, on so many levels, and also I have to say, with every listening, there's new ways of realizing what is the actual music, and so many layers. And I don't really know where to start. What I really would like to have from you, and I don't know if you want to go into it that deep, but I would like to have an order of events. If you feel like we could go through the record, and you can take me through what happened, because with so many songs, I had the feeling like, where is the initial idea? Where does the initial idea come from? Who had the initial idea, and how did you build on top of it? Because so many beautiful layers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely go through certain songs. I think the way that a lot of the music came about on this, the recordings came about, was inspired by the fact that we didn't really have a timeline. It was a labor of love and an excuse to sort of tinker in the studio together. But also, everything was sort of governed by and inspired by this music that Pino had written. And different songs were in various states completion or incompletion. So it was really case by case, but there were some things on that record that had existed in some form or another for 12 years.
Wow.
Before, we started working on them.
Like, what's the oldest?
I think the oldest idea on there might be Soundwalk. Soundwalk Soundwalk is a really interesting story. So I'm trying to retell, Pino's story, but I think it was the first D'Angelo tour. And that was like early 2000s. And they were snowed in Chicago, stuck in a hotel for a few days. And Pino was able to go out and get a mini disc recorder and was just messing around in the hotel room, programming drums and playing bass and guitars. And he had this progression and as he puts it, like a terrible programmed drum beat and stuff. And he played some guitar on it. I think maybe sent it to whoever was playing keys in the band at that time. Maybe it was James. I think later on he sent the demo to the saxophone player in D'Angelo's band at the time. His name is Jacques Schwartzbart. And so Jacques took the demo and played this incredible horn arrangement over it. So Pino for years loved what Jacques had played on this idea, but he kind of hated everything else about it. And thought nothing of it because he only had the 2-track. He had lost the mini disc recorder and everything. And one day when we were at the studio together, a friend of mine, Dave Godowski, who works at Isotope, came by to show me this new software that they had been developing called Rebalance. Rebalance is it's essentially you can load in a 2-track and remove the drums from it or remove the vocals from it. It analyzes the audio and tries to decipher what's what, and you can rebalance the mix. Wow. When he brought it by, it was pretty alarming because it essentially means you can make stems, sort of crudely, but you can make stems from anything. I mean, like we loaded Hey Jude in and removed Paul McCartney from the outro.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like this is dangerous territory. But Pino thought, like, wait a minute, this could be really great. So we tried to see what we could do with getting the horns extracted, just take everything else out of this piece of music that he had, this mix. And we did, but we the way the Rebalance looks is it's like a series of faders, with different, like you got vocals and drums and guitar. And if you pull them all the way down, obviously they're all the way gone. As you start to bring them back up a little bit, you just get these remnants of, whatever the algorithm is. And we kind of found a balance where there were still some other things from his demo that creep in every so often, like a guitar hit or keyboard or something like that. But essentially just took the horns and started over. And I played percussion on it and a little guitar.
Cool.
And it was just like, it's like we started from the horns of this idea of his and then built around that. And other songs, were the opposite, which maybe is more traditional, but it was just a total journey from one song to the next.
That's now that you said it, a journey from one song to the next. That makes total sense. Also in terms of the sequence of the songs. I really love how one song goes into the other and sometimes contrasts what has come before. But with some instances, I think, the man from Molise, and Off the Cuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like both of them are in 7 and somehow in the same pulse tempo or whatever. It feels like an afterthought to me, it feels like an afterthought of what came before, you know. And also with that beautiful ballad, Notes and Attachments.
Mm-hmm.
And the song after that is Jerkel, I think.
I think so. I think you're right.
It sounds like, and when I first listened to it, I heard that ballad and I was like, oh, I need to remember this. Which song is this? You know, next time I listen to it, I wasn't sure where the other song started because it moves in so nicely together. So that's a topic that interests me. Like, how do you go about finding an order for a CD, and what's your
sequencing?
Yeah, sequencing, and what's your goal in that?
I don't know if there's a theory. Like in practice, there was one interesting. Somebody told me one time that Paul Simon had this thing he would do where he would at the end of the previous song in a sequence, he would, like at the last beat of that, or as soon as the audio is done, he would begin a sort of imaginary count in of at the tempo of the next song, you know. So like 4 beats or 8 beats, whatever was appropriate at the tempo before the first hit of that song,
right?
As like a guide for spacing. But I mean, you've probably done this. Like usually when you're coming up with a sequence, you kind of throw them all into a iTunes playlist or something, and listen to tempo and key and consider like maybe the length of the song, and what how fresh somebody's attention span might be through the course of that. But it's usually pretty like self-evident. I remember when I was younger feeling a little more like, well, I mean, this is one order, and then this other one that's really different is another order, and I can't tell which one's better. And but nowadays it seems to sort of reveal itself, maybe just going through the process of doing it. I never listened to an album with an active awareness of like judging the sequence, but it probably does help keep me invested in the album longer if it's well thought out,
right?
If it's well planned.
If it's not, that takes your attention away, and also sometimes it can get your attention, or like, oh, that felt like a bump or something, or weird, or
right,
or why am I not paying attention anymore, or why does it feel weird?
Yeah, because, I don't even know who we made this record for, like what kind of listener, like any of the anxiety of like, oh, there's no vocal in this, and are people going to remain interested? It wasn't really a part of the process of working on this music, because it felt so generous with its I don't know, it's composition and like the playfulness and the parts and melodies and sounds and stuff. It felt engaging, and like it wasn't it wasn't mood music. It didn't just sort of like establish a theme and then just repeat that to sort of like like until 3 minutes had come and gone or something like that.
Yeah, they're cool. Cool compositions,
Yeah, I mean that's really it's Pino's compositional voice, harmonically, rhythmically, structurally, even in certain cases. I think like what some of the songs that are more groove based may have started from a loop. Like I know some of the sessions were like Ekute, I think was just a loop. And the way that we built it into an arrangement had a lot to do with the fact that there was a session, a multi-track drum kit and a Pro Tools session that I could open up at my house and play with and try to create, an arc of some sort. And then, call Pino, say, hey, come over and listen to this and tell me what you think. And he would go, oh, that's great. I'd change a drum pattern or something by half timing the drums or something like that. I can't remember it, but just for, example, I would alter what the drums were doing at a certain point, and it would give him an idea, and he would replay it, a new bass line over it. So all of a sudden we had a B section. There were things like that would occur.
Did you do that
to break it out of the loop thing?
Ekute as well? Yeah,
I think Ekute was the first song we started working on together. So when I was working on the John Legend record, Pino and Chris Dave were the rhythm section on that, and we were in New York to play the premiere of the album, or a late night thing, I can't remember. And Pino invited me down to an engineer called Ben Kane, his home studio, to play on a track of Pino's music. And that was the first time I'd ever heard his own stuff, and that was Ekute. And it was essentially a loop, and I think maybe Pino had a couple of bass lines he would go back and forth between for sections, and there were horns. I think all of Marcus Strickland's stuff was already on there, and there were some vocals and other parts. And I played the fuzz guitar, the baritone fuzz guitar thing. That kind of sounds like a sax, a baritone sax. And just had a great time, and then maybe a month or two later, asked him about that song and how things were going. So I haven't really, worked on it since then. And I said, would you mind if I got that session from Ben and just kind of had a look through like what I played and the song and made a comp for you or something like that. And so I got the session from Ben, and then we opened it up at my house and started kind of conspiring, like, all the different things that you could do with this, and just with what's there, manipulating what's there in the box, with plugins or edits.
I was wondering about that, because you freaked me out with the drum part there. My favorite part, it's a tiny part, but my favorite part from the song is this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa! I need to learn this," but I couldn't find the one. I couldn't find. Took me a long time, and finally, I think like 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes before we started talking. You repeated a little bit different, but you repeated in the end, and there it starts with an upbeat to the one. But and I think this is how it is before. But what you do with the drums there, and to me, it sounded live. It sounded like live drums playing that way, and I can imagine Chris Dave doing that type of stuff. And I've heard him do that type of stuff. But it's fascinating to hear that it was you in a way.
Well, I don't know if I'm sure exactly which drum thing you're thinking of, but the only things I did to Chris's drums were on that song, were isolating certain microphones to make it sound like a dynamic change. So even though the loop has, continued, or that you've heard the performance, it sounds a little like, the song is all responding to the drummer. Everything in the song is responding to the drummer. all of a sudden playing differently, when in fact it's just, transient designing to make the decay shorter and make it sound like it's being played softer, and changing the balance of the microphones.
Oh, okay.
But then the timing, the only thing that would have like actually changed the pattern is like halfway through that song when it kind of drops and it sounds like the drums get pitched down and are like going through a washing machine. That's just halftime, like slowed down halftime and an octave, lower for the drums, but same part, same playing. That little figure, I think that was something I played in New York. I think that was something, a guitar part I had added in New York.
Super cool, man.
But there's also a combination of, let me think about this for a second, because there's a bunch of guitars that Pino played initially, like the intro guitars are Pino, like the kind of like DI acoustic sound. Those were original, maybe like even the foundation of the idea, the song. And then maybe the harmony you're thinking of, that might have been something I played on top of that line. It's like kind of it sounds like it could have been like a Fela Kuti horn line or something. I think that's sort of the inspiration behind this track for him.
Wow, I love it. I was playing along to that, it's so great. I mean, I was playing along to the whole record. It's just so much fun, and there's so much stuff that comes at you when you play over it. So much stuff to obviously it's not intended as a playback, don't get me wrong, but that's what I always do. I like something and I want to be in it. I want to be part of it.
Yeah,
so I play along.
I remember doing that just in my imagination with my favorite records, and it felt like I was practicing being in an ensemble, practicing playing in a band or something, because you're responding to what's happening, but you're also trying not to step on anything that somebody else does. And it's sort of like you're playing in a band of people who aren't listening to you. Which is, there's probably some good lessons in there, like to just kind of to really get that ear muscle working.
Absolutely. But playing with others, that's something that I wanted to talk to you about is what does it mean to you to lock in with somebody?
I'm not sure like how I would describe or ascribe meaning to it. I think there's just a real joy in finding a rhythm, with other people or with people with what they're playing. I don't know. It's just part of the satisfaction of making music, at all, to begin with. I think there's something to be said for like what rhythm does to your brain, where like it presents you a pattern that allows you to anticipate where something is going to land, like something that's coming is going to fall. That's part of the reward system of music is I think kind of like it playing with your expectations and rewarding that, and then sometimes challenging that a little bit, but still at the other side of that is some kind of a reward. Whether that's somebody playing with the bar and playing over it, or doing a variation on something that's expected. All those things are like little treats for your mind's eye. I think that's part of the joy that I experience, playing with other people, is that they bring something beyond your imagination, beyond your own sort of vocabulary to the table, and that's just infinitely more interesting, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the first of those trio videos of you guys playing that material. Oh, by the way, when did you record this? Was it after the
record?
After the record. That so it quite recently, or?
Yeah, pretty recently. We did the live videos. I think it was like late December, where we went into the studio, and it was the first time most of that stuff had ever been played live. Because I mean, even the record, most of the record was built in layers.
Yeah.
And even some of the melodies came after the sessions and the tracks had begun. Like Just Wrong was, for a while, it was just the bass line and the chord progression. There wasn't the melody. There wasn't the ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-ba-da-da-da. It wasn't until Larry Goldings came in and to play Mellotron that Pino even said, like, I have this idea for a melody that I've been hearing in my head, and just kind of hummed it, or sang it to Larry. And then Larry reharmonized that or just added harmony to it, and then later on Sam came in and kind of reinforced the melody. So, and then there's also there's the response melody with the fretless bass harmonics. That stuff, that was all like an additional thought, an additional idea. So when we got together to do the in studio live videos, we were kind of listening to what we had done on the recording and figuring out, like, how do we perform this? Where's the composition? What's necessary to the composition to display? And like Pino figured out a way somehow to do the bass harmonics and the bass line at the same time. Which is insane. And Sam kind of remapped a way to execute some of the harmonies and stuff with his pedals live, some of the harmonies that Larry had come up with. So
it's very interesting how he does it also on the 7 off the cuff, where you guys are playing the triads over the bass line, in the
solo section.
There's something
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Is that the right? Wait. Dun, 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 bum, bum, bum. Are you talking in Men from Molise? Or in the live video?
Yeah, I mixed it up. Yeah, on the C part, where you play the C.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I played it correctly, but but there's the triads going on.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was fascinating really to see with him with the pedals there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's doing so much math off the top of his head, and it never sounds like somebody counting, but he's doing so much. It's like kind of like pedal steel in a way, but that's, I mean, that whole day was really fun. Just kind of like, we would sit and listen to the song on playback in the room and kind of like, get to a certain section and be like, okay, stop it. Can you stop it? Pause it there. And just sort of like look at each other and be like, and like figure out some of the harmony and stuff. And like a lot of the stuff was improvised on the record too. So
yeah, can I ask you about one moment? It was like
yeah,
and then it goes in a it goes there later on. First, when I heard it, and it's also the other sittings after that, I was like sure that this was improvised, because it sounds so, you know, laissez-faire in the moment, like, and I was also fascinated by, okay, we're playing in C, but the guy is, you know, he's playing in E major, you know, E major somehow. And it sounds so something like maybe Wayne Shorter could have played on something like that, you know, like who would think of that? But but then when I saw the trio video, I was like, wait, he's playing it again. Is it the song, or?
It's sort of a thing that happened in the moment, and it was like, okay, well, if we're going to represent the song, and look, this could absolutely change over the course of the lifetime of the song. Like it may not need to be treated so much like a theme down the road, but at the time, and still right now, it just feels like something to represent. You know, it's worth representing.
Yeah,
it's like, it's so quotable, you know, and when you get to that section, if that doesn't happen, if you're familiar with the song, if we got to that point and didn't play that, it just felt a little like wrong. Like you know, plus there's something about the fact that, so on the record, that moment was totally spontaneous, but there's something, it has a different meaning when it's presented intentionally, you know, with the two of us playing it in unison on the live video. It does land a little differently. It comes across more like a theme than an impromptu moment like it does on the album. So two versions of the same thing. But no, that was totally, you know, Sam just kind of coming up with, I think we had that section as a like there was no solo or anything going on in it for a minute, as a kind of like a round before the Trace solo. So it was like, does this need something, you know, and that went on for like months or whatever, and then finally we just like, let's just call Sam, you know, have him come in and try something, and that's what he came up with, and we were like, well, that's that. Yeah.
But it never sounds on, I mean, on the whole record, I mean, a couple of exceptions, but it never really sounds like, okay, here's the solo, here's your solo, now just jam or whatever, you know. There's a lot of like sensitivity around soloing on the record, because it's really not meant to display anybody's virtuosity. I mean, there's some virtuosic ideas happening, and there's some really like incredible playing happening, but it's not presented to be admired on its like on those merits. You know, it's supposed to be musical and fun and thrilling. You know, so there were just a few things that I think everybody naturally wanted to avoid, with the idea of it being an instrumental album or a solo album, you know, from like the two of us who are both instrumentalists, but not really like not trying to prove anything on the instrument, you know, with this music. It was like, I think you know what I mean, like trying not to we were trying not to make like the neo soul record, you know, the obvious thing that people might expect from Pino. Was just like, we never even had to talk about like, what if we don't make it that, you know, like it was just like, it was not going to happen, but there are still moments of that kind of clock, you know, and that sort of rhythmic identity and
and some sensibilities there, but like there isn't there aren't a lot of the frills, on the record that, to be honest, might happen more naturally for people like us in music with a vocalist, like where you've got something to sort of like hang those little gestures on. You've got like a central identity, right? To where if you do something kind of like, some flight of fancy in between two vocal lines, at least it feels like you're adding to something that's still greater than you, right? But if it's an instrumental record, or if it's a record and it's the under the artist names of the instrumentalists, it feels a little more like there's a spotlight, an expected sort of, all right, what have you got?
Yeah, right. It's tempting.
Kind of thing. Well, it's confusing for me more than anything, because it's like there's an expectation, and I don't feel, this is just me personally talking, not for anybody else, but like I don't necessarily feel like I can always deliver the expectation, of that sort of thing either. So it's not like I'm just sitting on all these like incredible licks that I could be playing, just kind of like, well, I'm not going to do any of them. It really does come down to, like, I think sometimes there's misconceptions of, what somebody would do or could do as well. And like, really we're just trying to make something that we can sort of loosely see in our heads and hear, but it's delicate, and it's hard to uncover that result. So there's very little time to sit back on it and go, all right, now what would I do if I was just going to blow over this, this section? It's just, we don't have that sort of mentality, that approach to it.
I mean, I think it's good for the music, but it's not what usually would be the case for people like you, or people of, as you said, where certain things are expected from. Like, now we don't have a singer, now we can finally play, that's right. That's also in there, Yeah. But so that you don't go there is even more amazing. And what was I going to say? The thing is, what I wanted to say is with the live videos, in terms of locking in with somebody, I was so amazed with Just Wrong, how you guys were together. And this is why I was asking, what does it mean to you to lock in with somebody? Because there was no drums, and there was also, I don't know if there was any percussion. I think I only saw the video to Just Wrong only once. The other ones.
Yeah. There were no percussion. There was no, what there was going on was like sort of a steady, just a pulse that we could hear. That doesn't really, it was not loud enough to where it was coming through,
right.
Anything else. It was just kind of a boop, boop, boop.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it kind of helped us keep our tempos consistent from, one section to the other. I think when we had it going, we thought, oh, this will sound cool, but it just, we weren't listening to it loud enough to where it registered ultimately when we listen back. So there's some tempo consistency there, that is because of that bass drum loop. But beyond that, it was, I think it was the first one that we tried to tackle. And so the amount of listening by everybody was like at its peak, of the whole day. You're just sort of like you're really tuned in. You don't want to make a mistake, but you also, like, all three of us barely had a grasp on like what we were doing and where we were in the song and what we were like supposed to play next. It really, that day felt like really just out of reach for us at certain points, you know. And there were a few songs where we attempted to take, and it was just like so obvious that was the rehearsal. You know, we were like, okay, I kind of know what I'm supposed to do now. But then we played the song again, and it would have that same kind of elusive feeling of like, for me, this music is really, really pushing the my boundaries. As I'm not a jazz musician, I don't have that under my hands and like in my like kind of quick go-to reach. That harmony, this sort of like, you know, when you hear a chord in your head and you know what chord it is, you know, that for me, like in the sort of standard repertoire of chords is pretty easily gettable. But when you start hearing chords superimposed on each other, you know, 2 or 3 times over, like some of this music is built with, it becomes really hard to know like where you are in the song or in the chord progression, because as far as I know, I'm just contributing this F sharp major chord, but I know the chord is not an F sharp major chord, and I know like what Sam's playing is different, and you know, I don't even know what note Pino's playing.
But
you know, so
hang on, where do you get those informations though? Where does Sam know what he's supposed to play, and where do you know that you're playing an F sharp major?
Well, it's in like the example of Just Wrong, that chord progression, most of that chord progression was written by Pino. So like I'll know this shape, you know, as he wrote it, and it's an F sharp shape, but it's really just an extension of the chord that we're all collectively playing together.
Right.
Which is not an F sharp chord.
Yeah.
You know, and there'll be like, you know, 12 of those in a row. And I just never, I was never like, I never went through the process of figuring out, okay, what actually are the chords here?
Yeah.
What actually is going on?
What are they standing for?
Yeah. Yeah. And like sometimes I'll know, and then other times I won't. And I'll just be like, I just, you know, it's that chord, you know, it's that sound. I'm like, oh yeah. Or you recognize it on guitar and you're like, oh yeah, I know that chord, you know, but I'd never use it.
Yeah.
It's unfamiliar to me. It's a little unfamiliar to me. And it's part of what I enjoy about, you know, about collaborating on this music with him. Being brought in.
Do you think that this has definitely extended your vocabulary, this record?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's challenged a lot of things about my ear. But there's something really approachable about Pino's sense of harmony, I think.
Yeah.
There's something really listenable about like all the places that it goes. Sometimes there would be little things to the music that like I felt like maybe I would bring that would help establish that aspect of it or strengthen that aspect of it. You know, the like maybe some things that on Just Wrong, I'm trying to think of what I would call this section. It's kind of it's what we go to get back to the verse after the B section. So it kind of goes into an F sharp dominant 7, yeah, and then it goes into like an F sharp over E,
right,
kind of thing, and then an A7. I think that section I came up with just based on where my ear led me to from what he'd written just previously. You know, sort of like it was like what it seemed it was almost like a fake out, like he was going to go in this direction, but instead, went back. And I said, well, what if we continued in that direction and like went to where it might suggest it's going to go. And so there's some things that I think just sort of, travel with your ear on the record that came from me, and but most of them came from him.
I think I don't know if that is a bit nerdy now, but I think I found another augmented chord of yours in the music that I felt like it has to be from Blake.
Which song?
I think it's on Notes with Attachment. Yeah, Notes with Attachments. And it goes from B flat to B flat augmented, and then to G flat over B flat to E major. It's like
I play him. Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds like Blake.
Yeah. Yeah. So that song came from, that was one of the only things that we on this record started from not one of Pino's compositions. It was something from Larry. He came by and was playing a bunch of little things that he had saved, similar to where a lot of the Pino stuff had come from, just like little voice memos or sessions or snippets of things. And so the kind of melody and chords and the modulation were present in this idea, and he had the MIDI saved because I think he'd initially done it on like a soft synth. So I took the MIDI and sent that out to a bunch of different analog synths and things that could receive MIDI, and that were all in different parts of the live room. And then each of them was going through a really slow tremolo, so a lot of the information would be missing, from each instrument. There'd be a lot of silence, and it would just kind of only come in for a minute, play some of the part, and then go away. And so that created this like conversation from different instruments in the live room, and you didn't really know what it was going to be, where certain phrases were going to happen and on what keyboard and what sound. And then in a few spots, I went in and changed some of the harmony and or added notes and stuff, and that was one of them, was just kind of like creating a little tension. I played some EBO fretless guitar to kind of sound like flutes and stuff, and I think maybe that's what helped add that augmented part. It was just that arrangement of those guitars. But yeah, I can't get away. I think if there's ever music where it's like, oh, this is chordy music, my contribution is going to be some form of an augmented chord. Like, hey, bet you guys never heard one of these before.
It helped me because it helped me to strengthen because it functions as a such a great color, as a dominant color to go somewhere else, especially to a major chord, because to me there's a mystique in it.
Completely.
It's like, what is it? I mean,
it's whimsical. It's kind of like it suggests it suggests that it's like there's more to the story. Yeah. It sets you up for whatever's coming next, because you know that there's something coming.
Yeah, and also harmonically speaking, you can go to so many chords with one augmented chord. It can take you to not just the obvious like 5-1 thing. You can go from
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways to, and even more like more than that, to go. So it's like if you have it, that's like a junction to anywhere.
Totally. And that moment that you referred to, Sam's solo and Man from Molise, to me, it scratches the same itch, the E over C.
Right.
Yeah. It has that color of the augmented and the sharp 4 in it that are so like otherworldly.
Sharp 5, right?
Has the sharp 5 for the augmented, but it also has the sharp 4 because he's doing G sharp to F sharp.
Oh yeah.
And in major 7. So it has this like whole tone scale thing going on for a second, but also the major 7, so it's just, you really get this like, that was what was so alluring about working on this music, about the I don't know what it's called, but when you have those superpositions of chords over, like just triad chords over one another, that it was just like working with a whole new dimension. It's like a whole new category of compositional tools that they're still, it feels like a new puzzle, and the pieces of which are just all scattered around the table. But as I'm continuing to write, it's just like there's all these new things that you can try and see if it fits, coming up with ways to play it on guitar. And of course it'll sound like one thing on guitar and another on piano, so I'm going back and forth between the two instruments to get ideas for one another.
Cool. I'm looking forward to hear that.
Thanks. Me too.
Are you working on something new, like a new record or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, just writing. Always writing when there's sort of an impetus, and working with Chris,
right,
a lot, and there's another new song with Pino that we've been kind of chipping away at. So yeah, I mean, definitely more stuff to come at some point, hopefully soon. And
it was funny when in our last conversation you were like, yeah, I feel like probably I'm going to release something else sooner than I would usually do, and 2 months after that I get a new record.
Yeah. Well, I forgot. I don't think I was even considering that. I mean, I knew we were going to put it out soon, but I don't think we had set on the date because the pandemic just changed everything. We were going to release it towards the end of last year, maybe, or like third quarter last year, because I was going to be on the road for Mutable Set. And then we were going to put this out and I would just stay on the road and tour this music with Pino.
That's interesting, because usually when I read interviews of yours, I get the feeling that you don't really appreciate it so much being on the road or something, or it's not something that you feel like doing most of the time.
Yeah, well, I think there's some pressure that I feel when I'm touring my own music that is not necessarily there when I'm a member of a band, or backing somebody else up. So it's not. I wouldn't say that all touring is equally intense feeling for me, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, the pandemic sort of changes everything, right? I mean, it takes that option off the table. So right there, you already there's this sort of thing like you can't have it, so you want it more. But maybe even more meaningfully, there's now a clearer sense. I have a clearer sense of why live music is important to so many people, and I didn't really have that before, because the reasons why it was important to me were different than why I figured it was important to an audience member. Now I have a certain respect for it that I don't think I had previously. Just the profundity of a shared experience,
Yeah.
you know, and something that is so different from what you do every day. You know, the fact that like when we went into the studio to make those live in studio videos for this stuff, that was the first time I had heard any, you know, unrecorded music, any music being played other than just me at the house.
Isn't that a crazy feeling? I mean, isn't it?
Yeah, it was insane. It was like, you know, it just felt like the first hit of something.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that like for a lot of people who do go to shows and love live music, that that is separate from what they get to and do every day, you know, or from their regular experience. Like it's a celebration, and a really meaningful one. And so it's changed my perspective on that. But even before the pandemic, I was excited to go out and tour Mutable Set because I was going to just do those shows as a trio with Sam Gundel and Aaron Embry, and to play music with those two every night. And we were, you know, we were going to do some of Aaron's songs in the set and some of Sam's songs in the set. So there was that load off a little bit on me of like, I don't really want to go and like play through an hour and a half of my own music, whether anybody would want to hear it or not. I don't, it's
but why? Can you explain a little bit more?
It's like being asked to, it just feels, I don't know. It would have to comprise, the set would have to be comprised of material from like multiple records, and like some of those records are, I was like, those songs are just not a part of my like consciousness anymore. I don't know how I play them and like really feel inside of them, you know, or reinvent them or something.
Yeah.
So there's a certain like, I would love to go and play these shows, but I wish we could just do covers. You know, I mean, there's something.
But can I ask
playing
you,
my own music? Yeah.
Who's preventing you from doing that?
Nobody's preventing me, but I feel like it's not why people would be going to those shows. And I think it would be, I'm sort of torn because I think it would be a disappointment to some of those people. And I don't want to, like, I don't take joy in bringing that disappointment.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of occasions where like we go out and just play shows of cover songs. Like that happens, but they're not billed as, you know, an evening with Blake Mills or something like that. So it's just, it would feel a little like false advertising in a way. But the idea of a show of some of my music, some of Aaron's music, some of Sam's music, I feel like that would be, I still feel like there's a generosity in that, and it would be a gift to anybody who's a fan of my music. You know, I'd feel comfortable with that.
I didn't want to convince you or anything, but I get the feeling like if I like Blake Mills, I'm gonna pay money to see him play whatever he feels like.
I think there's some people, I mean, I'm the same way. I don't go to a show with an expectation. But there is, I sort of place it on myself. Like, I mean, when you do your own shows, do you ever think like, I mean, do you ever feel a little like burned out on your own material and kind of like want to switch it out and throw other stuff in there. Like, I don't sit around and play my own songs at home all day, and I certainly don't like on the radio or whatever, on Sonos, and I don't sit down and play through my songs when I'm playing guitar.
Right.
So there's already something kind of performative about doing that at a show. So it isn't the sort of natural, like, you're just coming to see what this musician is going to do in their free space and their time, in that case. So the best case scenario, I think, is designing a show where you can play those songs in a way that you feel inside of them while you're playing them. And sometimes that means changing something about it. And if that just disrupts somebody's listening experience, that doesn't bug me as much, because I know why I'm doing it, and maybe that person wanted to hear the record version of the song, and like, I just think that that's maybe an unreasonable expectation in 2020 or 2021 to be like shocked when you go to the show and the band or the artist isn't playing the record for you. Like, get over it. But showing up and like, I'd be kind of pumped if like on the idea of going to a show, like if Cass McCombs had a show and he was like, tonight I'm going to be strictly doing Lucinda Williams songs, I would have a laugh, but I would also understand that people in the audience who are like, come on, bro. And it's not because Lucinda songs aren't great.
There's the story of Friedrich Gulda, the Austrian classical piano player who also did a little bit of jazz playing, and he was extravagant figure, did crazy stuff, but was very well regarded in the classical world also. So he did this piano show at a big hall, and he was coming out to announce, which rarely they do that rarely in the classical world. Usually there's the program presented to the audience, and they know what's being played and they know when to clap and whatever. So he's like, tonight I'm going to play Schönberg for you guys. And the audience was expecting Beethoven,
Oh, wow.
So he was like, I'm going to play Schönberg for you tonight. And so the audience was like, oh, this wasn't what I paid for. I'm going to leave, give me my money back or whatever.
Yeah.
So most of the audience left. And then he was like, and now I'm going to play Beethoven for you, because you're the right guys, you stayed, And that really reminds me of something that is so important to me, of another classical piano player, Claudio Arrau. He wrote a book about playing the piano. And he said something that is so important to me. He said, always play for the ideal listener.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love that, because that gives you all the freedom to do whatever, who's the ideal listener for you?
Yeah. And you sort of manifest it.
Yeah. Within you.
Yeah.
And then you can do whatever, in a way, I feel like.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. And it prevents you from pigeonholing your audience or like dumbing something down, and babying your listeners and stuff. It really, that's fantastic advice. And I'll remember that, keep thinking that too. Just in terms of decision making, it's good, like compositionally, and trying to think of like, how should I feel with this idea? How should this make me feel? It's like, well, sometimes I look at it like, maybe it's a little less healthy. It's not the ideal listener. It's like, I think of it as what would the listener who's like not predisposed to liking me or my music, how would this hit them? You know, like somebody who's not a fan.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's not like it. That's not monolithic. Like there are people who would never be fans of my music, and that's not who I have in mind. But there is sort of like somebody whose opinions of my music I might actually be inclined to agree with. You know, their criticisms are like, mostly right. So I kind of like, sometimes I have that person in my head, that sort of devil's advocate, and use that to try to break through.
Level it.
Yeah.
What would be the best way to listen to the new record?
I don't know, because I don't know what experience people are supposed to have with it.
Right, but I mean, just in terms of sound, where do you think it sounds best? Because I heard from somebody that maybe you were misquoted, or I don't know. Somebody said that you prefer CD sound of your music to LP sound.
Yeah, I think, LPs, there's some things that happen in translation when you're pressing to vinyl, just sonically. And when that was the popular medium, people made records with that in mind. So they chose sounds and treated sounds and mixed music with the knowledge that this is going to end up on vinyl, and certain things are going to pop out and other things are going to get lost if we don't treat them as such. So all the time that I spend working on the mix or the balance or the subtleties of a record are with a certain, like, based on the medium of the digital realm. There's a certain detail and a certain kind of like flatness that provides, and a noise floor. When you transfer certain things to vinyl, sometimes it's really flattering. Like sometimes things that were not intended to be on vinyl can sound, better, quote unquote, better on vinyl, because it's kind of like applying a filter to a photo. Sometimes you do it and you're like, oh, that makes it look way better. But for the most part, the stuff that I work on, where we've spent time on the mix, it's with the intention that that's going to be preserved. That, to say nothing of like the variety and ways in which people can still listen to digital music, and how that can sound drastically different in one scenario from the next. But with vinyl, that's still the case, because you've got the variance in people's, home systems or whatever they're listening through, plus the added noise floor, plus the fact that, it's a physical medium. So every record sounds different from the next. You don't have that with CDs. There are a lot more variables. And when I said that and was quoted as saying that, it was in respect to Heigh Ho, where there was a lot of bottom end information and then a lot of sort of like extreme kind of air top stuff to balance that out. And with vinyl, you lose, you lop off a certain amount at the bottom that can't physically be reproduced without making the needle jump. You mono a lot of bottom end for similar reasons on vinyl, and you lose some top. So it just changed the bandwidth of that music, and I didn't really, I would have done a different mix for vinyl if that was, what was intended and some of the choices that we made, sonically, I would have gone a different route. But there's some good cases to be made for certain records. I'm sure, that the vinyl is far superior. I mean, especially things that were intended for vinyl. There's some remasters of stuff that were done in the 2000s and in the 90s that are questionable, but there's some remasters that are actually really good. And the reason they were done is because when you listen to that, on a CD or digitally, it's quite harsh, and it wouldn't be on vinyl.
So how about the new record?
I'll tell you when I have a chance to listen to it, because we've had some problems with the vinyl pressing on this one. And it appears like it might actually cause a delay in, when we'll be able to start sending those out, the pre-orders of those, fulfilling those, because things are so backed up now. And I think 2 of the plants last year had fires. There's like very few places where they're still pressing and manufacturing that are accessible. And it takes so long to get a test pressing, listen to it, get, if there's any problems with it, have them take another pass at it, ship that out. You listen, you're like, nope, the problem is still there. And they're like, okay, well, that means you got to recut, and a lot of the places that we use are not even functioning right now for those because the pandemic. So I think it can sound really good because it's a short record. I think we can get volume. When we did it, the guy that we used, Ian Sheffick, he didn't have to mono any of the bottom end. And there's a lot of sort of subtle stereo bottom end stuff going on. So he was like, I don't think I have to touch that. I think you'll be fine, because you can make the grooves so wide because of the track length, the running length. So I'm excited. I think it could be really good. It's definitely not one of those kind of records where I'm going into it thinking like we're just gonna lose something, at vinyl.
Tell me about the mind of Chris Dave.
Mind of Chris Dave. That started from similarly to Écoutez. It was a recording that Pino had made at his apartment. No, his house in London, I think. And Chris was playing like a little child's drum kit, like a baby, like a little tiny drum set. And Pino had this bass line, and it was just a loop. It just kind of went around, and there was just the one section. So it was like one of those instances of trying to build more sections and more music off of this, all that we had. I don't remember how long the loop was, but maybe 32 some odd bars or something like that. And what else is on that track? Even instrumentally, I'm kind of like I'm drawing a bit of a blank. Oh yeah. So there's like some rubber bridge guitar. That's just one guitar, and then its delay is panned. Like it's a hard pan, and then the delay is panned on the other side. Like if you take one headphone out and listen, it's just the one on its own, which was helpful when I was trying to remember what I played on it. The other day we were filming. We've got these visualizers that are going to be, I think they'll be out by the time this airs, because when you listen to music on YouTube, people make these visualizers now so that like whether it's, you know, lyric video or an animation or something like that. We're kind of going extra on the visualizers for this with the director who I made the music video for Vanishing Twin with, Justin Dashore Hopkins. We had this idea of kind of making an instructional video, like those old instrumentalists, you know, like how to, I don't know, it wasn't like how to play necessarily, but it was, you know, like the Victor Wooten kind of bass instructional video,
right,
kind of thing. Crossing that with like the Brady Bunch intro grid system, you know, and the fact that like there are a lot of kind of surrealist sounds on the record, and you know, guitars that don't sound like guitars, you know, strings that do sound like guitars, just stuff like that. So we just the other day went back over and kind of relearned the rest of the record, not in such a way to perform it as a trio like we did for the live videos, but like if we were displaying, you know, these parts, you know, this is what it would look like. So with that section in mind of Chris Dave with the delayed guitars or whatever, I was just like, Justin's gonna be super easy. I'm just gonna play this one time, and then all you got to do is just take the video and double it up, you know, instead of a slight delay. But to remember what I played, I had to take one of the headphones out and just listen to the one side.
Cool. When were moments during the recording process where you brought somebody in to do something, and that person totally did something that you had, you know, did not expect at all?
I mean, Sam usually does that, and Larry usually does that. I feel like there's an expectation of what I hope is achieved by what somebody plays, not necessarily knowing how they're going to achieve it, or like what should be played to achieve it.
You bring somebody in for a function, you mean?
Yeah, sometimes. Like with this record, there were plenty of instances where we would just have this feeling about a certain section of a song that it wasn't quite doing something yet, you know? So sometimes you bring in a player to just respond and to what to the music and come up with some options of things. And sometimes what they play just like saves it, you know? It's like that's the missing piece. Other times it's like they do something and it ends up going in another section, like, or, you know, you give them a pass from the top of the song, and what they do on this part that you thought was complete is like now so much better.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, you sort of know that you don't know what you're going to get with these kinds of musicians. Like that's why you reach out to them. All the stuff that I had an expectation for, I would just figure out a way to play, you know, like I wouldn't want to bring somebody in and then dictate the thing that I was hearing. That just didn't really, that wasn't relevant to this music, of the process of making this record.
When I was listening to it, I felt like, and I want to talk to you about this. Of course, I love the music of D'Angelo. And of course, I had recognized the greatness of Pino's playing in that music. But I had not really an idea about how his sound or his influence on, how big his influence on the sound of that music is. until I heard this record.
Hmm.
Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, there's a bit of a context there, but I think the way Pino puts it, he's like that thing, like that, a lot of that bottom end voice is present in the way that D'Angelo plays piano, like the way he shows the idea, the composition, you know, on piano, whether he's intending to keep the piano there or not. A lot of that that timing and that space will already be there, and I think maybe where they get on so great is that concept is not limited to what D'Angelo is, you know, is doing with his, you know, with his left hand in that instance. So in other words, it's not like it's something that Pino can immediately hear and understand and go, got it, you know. Yeah. And it's a language that he's able to speak and he's fluent in, and he's got his own ideas, you know, to play off of that. I think they just, you know, they're connected in that way. The way, like, Pino's sense of timing is so precise. It's so microscopic, like how he can hear certain things that just, like, he can differentiate between the smallest little nudge of something to where the intention of a part or the feeling of a part, it comes not only from the melody and its harmony, or the rhythm of that melody, but the execution of the rhythm.
Yeah, the phrasing, yeah.
Yeah, where in the bar it's placed. It's like it's so intentional that it gives a new meaning, you know, or defines the meaning sometimes of, like, what's being played.
Yeah.
And I've never been so aware of that concept as I was when we were working on this music.
The first song that comes to mind when we talk about that is that also the C part, with this, where it's in 7 on Man from Molise, how he executes that line and differentiates between the length of the notes and where they are placed.
Yeah.
And it still feels palpable and like something that's living. It's not, you know, not like this, you know.
No,
never.
You know, when you try to define it, it actually starts to slip away from you. Like when you try to, like, put your finger on exactly what the timing is of that section, you understand it even less. and I think that was kind of what I was finding when you know, it's just sort of a part of the fabric of the chord, you know, or of the arrangement, that if I tried to grasp it in the way that I'm used to understanding the music that I'm playing, I would feel it overwhelm me a little bit, and I didn't feel like I had a better understanding of it, you know. And maybe what I might offer to the music comes from my limited scope of, like, okay, I'm playing an F sharp major, right? So any thoughts or ideas or things I contribute, if I'm just thinking of this as F sharp major, what'll happen, you know? Like, how will those, you know, clash with the other stuff going on? Like, there's some things that come from that limited understanding that's about all I can offer to this music, because it's not, like I said, you know, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that I feel when I'm, like, working on a record that's gonna, like, be categorized as jazz music. It's not, you know, I'm out of my depths there, but somebody once told me that that Chet Baker kind of had a similar, ear-driven approach.
He couldn't read. No.
To that. Yeah. And I mean, not being able to read is one, one limitation, but the fluency, or like the understanding, of the music, and it's how sophisticated things can get really quickly in jazz, is definitely like, it feels like there's a bit of a ceiling there, and that all you can rely on is your sort of inner ear, and your instinct of what's going on. And sometimes, sometimes it's an advantage, but usually it's a disadvantage.
Well, it doesn't sound like that at all. You on that record, like you're limited, or you're not in your zone or whatever. You sound very much at ease and searching.
Yeah, but you only get to hear what I want you to hear. That's the wonderful thing about having the keys to the studio.
Right. How about that solo over 7?
7 doesn't feel that unfamiliar to me. I think rhythmically I'm less. I think rhythmically I've spent time around more sophisticated music than like your typical Western diet. And playing it and stuff. But the solo on that song for me was a little more challenging to contribute, just because of the like trying to figure out the sort of voice leading through the changes.
Yep.
And I can't. I don't think I still don't think I can like think fast enough in those ways to like always know where I am in the progression, or like ever know where I am, unless it's like this is the beginning. But I think there's enough of an understanding to kind of know, like, I guess the way that I find it is I'll find one shape that sort of works for maybe, I guess you'd call it like a passing chord, right? Or like, from something that just happens for a bar. I'll kind of find a shape on guitar near the area where I might think of like, my C root position as being, like the next chord I'll notice maybe like an E flat minor shape seems to kind of outline, this one little stab, that triad thing that you referred to, so I won't necessarily think like we're in E minor for that one bar, but at least I'll understand that I need to familiarize the sound of what going from C major melodically to E minor melodically sounds like, so that there's this kind of like vague melodic definition of the distance between those two scales. And then I'll try to like internalize or memorize that part of it, because I know I'll never be able to like think in terms of the modes and where I am and where I should go to next. But if I can have some sensibility of the architecture, like the shape, stringing those lines, those kind of fixed points of like C major to E flat minor, and then to E minor, and like just that chromaticism, that half step, and what that sounds like and feels like, then at least I'll know that wherever I end up in this improvised thing, I'll kind of know, like, my brain will be thinking about those relationships, however loosely.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my way of navigating a section like that as a soloist or a melodist.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's actually how I do it too, I think. That way you respect the harmonic movement, but also the skeleton that happens behind it in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. And it maybe gets you out of that thinking in terms of that language of you know, a language of exacts, like here are my limits. And it's just more of a, you know, it's kind of like, I always wonder what it is that when you see like a big flock of birds or a school of fish and they all sort of turn on a dime, you know, what it is that they're navigating through and sensing that they all have that same thought at the same time. It seems
Who's
like
the first guy?
who's the first guy, or is there some sort of like current, you know, like are they picking up on, are they all interpreting some external information in the same way? And like my brain, from like considering it, it kind of feels like it's this sort of school of fish, and that the changes are like some kind of external information, and it's just supposed to sort of push you in this one direction. And there are moments that like you can make a mistake in that, and it's still, you know, it's still right, or it's still fine, because you're kind of following this natural thing that's happening, even if you step outside of the box of it for a second.
Yeah, I love the forward motion in the energy of your solo in that track. Also, to me, it feels like somebody is like, get out of the way. Let me do my thing. What kind of instrument is this? It sounds like
a trace.
What?
A trace, Cuban trace. So it's like 3 choruses, and it's 9 strings.
Do you have it nearby? Do you want to show it?
No, it's at the studio. But it was like a little Martin backpacker guitar that was converted into a trace. And it's tuned a lot like the top 3 strings of a guitar, same intervals. So there's some commonalities there. But the transposition is different. The top, the string on the you know, closest to your thumb, like up here, and I still get confused. Some people call that top, some people call it bottom. That string is higher in pitch than the 2 lower ones, so a lot of your phrases get sort of inverted.
Yeah,
you know, and there's definitely some of that going on in guitar. So like when we did the live videos, there were some things about when I was comping on the melody, you know, and kind of playing along with the melody that like really worked well on trace. But then when you play those shapes on guitar, you don't have the same note doesn't pop out as the melody. So now I know how to play that song like half on trace and half on guitar, and it's even a more vague sense of, you know, the composition. Like, you know, it's like I barely know how to play this music still. You know? It's not going to be long before.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not going to be, once the music's out, like it's not going to be long before there are people who are probably going to show us stuff about these songs that we're just like, oh my God, you know, that's so sick.
If we would have known before.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I lost it.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted
you.
No,
that's fine. I interrupted you, by the way. So, we haven't talked about Jerkel yet.
No, Jerkel's a cool one. Jerkel.
Yes, that's my kid's favorite, by the way.
It is?
Yeah, that's what they sang along with. You know.
Wow, that's so cool.
Especially the bom 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 bom.
Great. Yeah, it has a little bit of a children's TV show thing to it, that section. That song originated from Pino was trying to find, so he'd done, I think it was a tour in Africa, and even played with Ali Farkatura, I think at a festival, or maybe had done a couple of shows with him. I'm not totally sure, but he was in Africa, and he had heard somebody playing this instrument called a jerkle, which is a one string. It's kind of like a jelly ngoni, but it's one string and it's tuned lower. And so he couldn't find one, and one day was just trying to approximate the sound of that on like a jazz bass. And so he had double tracked himself playing this sort of a line that was approximating the sound of that instrument. And all the other ideas were just kind of like based, around that idea, like the melody, sort of like a second jerkle line or ngoni based line. And I think the drums on that one, well, the drums don't come in until the end. Chris came in and played on that. And there's some like melody stuff in there that Sam's playing on sax, and those ideas I think came later, like once we had pulled this up. When he had first made the jerkle baseline demo idea, I don't know, it must have been years or something before. Most of the stuff was like sitting on a drive, various drives or iPhones or things like that, for years, just in little bits of ideas. So that was kind of the impetus of that one. Just like it all stemmed from these African instruments, most of which we didn't really have around. I've got a pretty decent jelly ngoni that's on the track that I play, but for the most part, it's like it's using instruments that we are familiar with to try to approximate a sound that we're, that both of us are pretty transfixed by.
Which song is I can't remember now, but there's one, and I was amazed by the use of the clavinet. There's one song, maybe it's, is it Soundwalk or Écoutez? Maybe Écoutez.
I think it's probably Écoutez, and I think Chris Dave plays it.
Because it's only bang, bang.
Yeah.
Because usually if you hear a clarinet, somebody's like going at it,
Yeah, I know, right?
And I love, because to me, it sounded like, somebody's selfless, or somebody's, has his ego in check, seeing a clavinet and just going bang.
I mean, it's also, it's so ballsy. It's such a big move.
Yeah.
Like I think music students should just like see every example of that kind of approach. I mean, it's because it's a magic trick. Mm-hmm. And like anybody who's ever been in the studio with Chris, he'll come in and if there's something to listen to beforehand, like a demo or somebody playing the song on one instrument, he'll come in and he'll just sit down, kind of, he's real quiet, just listen, and then okay, play it again. And once you've gone through the song, you've played it for him like 3 or 4 times, and you're kind of wondering like what's going on, and it seems like maybe he's like searching for ideas or something, but no, he's like scheming this grand plan, and sometimes it's like he'll go and build it by doing this one layer first, and you just hear these like little snippets, this one little part, like a little part or cowbell part or whatever, and then he's like, okay, give me another track, you know, and he just builds this ensemble of things that are, it's usually, it's not cyclical. It's not like it keeps doing the same thing over and over and you can like fly it, you know, or loop it. He's mapping out things, the topography of a song, in such a way where, I mean, I've seen him do that, listen to a song 3 or 4 times or maybe more, and then go in and play a pass on the kit, and his snare part is like, it's like he's carved out all these little spaces around the vocal. He's not playing backbeats. He's like doing these little etchings in between vocal phrases, you know. So he's memorized something about the song or what some element of the song's doing, and it's so heavy, you know, and it's the kind of thing you never forget once you've seen it. And I think if that kind of thing were more like, if that's what was sort of like memorialized or like talked about, you know, like around people growing up, like those were the kinds of stories that inspired me. And I think they're way more compelling than like, I don't know, the sort of like rock god guitar hero,
the shredding part.
Yeah. The iconography, you know, like that kind of, the profundity of something like what Chris does is more, it's sweeter to me. You know, we've got to brainwash kids into thinking that in those terms, you know, for the good of all of us.
It's a good place to stop, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that this could be part of the, you know, of the interview. It really is a special record to have been involved in, and I'm just, more than anything, I'm really happy that Pino's he's never put a record out of his own stuff. His compositional voice, even beyond the playing part of it, his compositional voice, I think, is a really unique thing, you know, special.
Yeah, it never sounds like a bassist record, although there are some great bass parts in it. But you know, he seems to think on so many different levels at once. Compositionally and playing also never sounds like, here, listen to my cool, you know, bass line or whatever. Although there's the cool bass line for sure, you know.
But it's not like everything else is there to set up the bass line. It's not all like pointing in that direction. When he was playing stuff for me, I remember the two things that came to mind, and this was not for every song by any means, but like, I do remember moments where I would go, this sort of reminds me of Brian Wilson, or this sort of reminds me of Mingus that I'm familiar with. And it would be bass players. It would be like, you know, both those guys are bass players.
And incredible composers.
Exactly. Like, there is an arrangemental voice, I think. There's a commonality in how, this is just a theory I have after working on this one record. So, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think that there might be a commonality in how bass players hear harmony and rhythm that allows them to build arrangements that do feel unique, you know, in that way.
I was thinking of Jaco. Did he talk to you about Jaco?
Not a whole lot. I mean, there's definitely like, there's a lot of fretless stuff from Pino on this record. And before D'Angelo, I mean, he was sort of known as a fretless bass phenom, you know, and it's a part of his playing and his voice that hasn't really spoken, for a while, to this degree. So there was definitely some aspects, like some shared things, between both those guys, that came out just by way of the fact that there was a lot of fretless information.
That's the obvious part, but I'm talking about the melodic, and especially the melody from Man from Molise. I hear how he sings that melody. He's really singing that melody. It's not like picking the melody, it's like singing.
Yeah.
Bringing it to the forefront. And certain melodic choices and movements also somehow gave me a Jaco vibe. And not only because of the fretless, but tone choices, chord choices.
Right. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, it's so cool to an instrument that's so unforgiving with chords sometimes, like to hear somebody's chordal decision making, a bass player's chordal decision making. I bet you there's some things that work on bass and some, on that instrument that that lead to some similar color choices, to
That's
people
true.
who compose. I know Men from Molise, I think that melody he actually did write not on the instrument, but just like walking down the beach, kind of had this melody in his head.
That's
so
such a tune. It felt to me like I knew it from somewhere, but not in a band way, it seems like it has been there forever. Like timeless.
It's original. Its original intent, or the way he had written that song and even recorded it at one point, was twice as fast. So it was like a Cuban. It was like he played it for me like that, and I was like, first of all, this is phenomenal, and there was some playing on the stuff that's like I don't even know how that exists, but I was like, what would this sound like if it was half speed? So I played it at half speed, like on Pro Tools, you can play something, you just hit spacebar and shift, and it plays it at half speed, and it's also down a whole octave. Everything goes down. So all of the, like everything, all the flute melody and all this stuff was now down in like sax register, and all of the rhythmic stuff was really sloshy, and people's timing was a little looser. It felt like Tom Waits playing Cuban music in Seven. And it's like, this is really interesting, and you can hear things about the melody at this speed that you don't pick up when it's faster, and when it's at the higher register too, like these big interval jumps and stuff come through. And so when we recorded it, we tried to emulate the sound of the stuff that had been slowed down, so like these drums are like I'm hitting rototom. It's like boom. I'm hitting it, and it's spinning the rim to get the sound of the drum to the pitch of it to arc in a way that was just happening when you with whatever previously was, and you slowed it down. And trying to get like the transients of things to be sort of long, and kind of sloshy in that way.
The intro is cool too, because you don't know where this is leading.
Oh yeah, it's totally.
And you can't differentiate the sounds also. Like, what is it? I mean, what is it?
Yeah. At a certain point, you kind of like. I hope people that just sort of give in and stop. Like, it's easy to. I figure with a record like this and with a musician like him, that people are going to come at it first, kind of clinically. Like a lot of his listeners and his fans are going to analyze it. Especially from a technical standpoint, like what gear and what's being played, and I hope that there's enough of there's enough interest, that there's enough going on to like satiate that interest, but that there's also enough that like you can't define and can't figure out, that allows that process to kind of like dissolve a little bit, you know, and that there's another layer to it for them.
Yeah, a lot of layers to them.
Yeah.
Like took me a while to find a marimba in there also. Like there's a little moment.
Yeah.
And I think a Glockenspieler or Celesta on maybe Just Wrong or something.
There's a little one note. There's some like stuff, you know, kind of layered in there to add to the sort of Esquivel soundscapey thing to it. Yeah. At
what point did you decide to say, okay, this is also a Blake Mills record?
I think when we were working on Écoutez, that was the first one. The stuff that was happening to the song and the sort of new sections that were being created that was just stuff I was doing on my own at my house, and then I would show to Pino and say, does this do anything for you? And that's what carried us into like another song and another idea, and then that carried into the idea of a record and how we would make that record. It wasn't until like we knew it was a collaborative project because that's how we worked on all the music, but we didn't necessarily decide that it was going to be a Pino and Blake record. That wasn't as obvious because it felt like there were more people involved. You know, Chris's voice is very present on this. Sam's voice, Larry's voice, Marcus Strickland. You know, it's like there are a lot of players, but I think we didn't feel like it was necessarily a band either, because it was not a consistent group of people from song to song, and that the thread line from each thing was, you know, the commonality really was the two of us, and that the finished result was you know, if nothing else, a result of Pino's compositional sensibilities and rhythmic identity and melodic identity and then texturally and arrangementally, you know, some of my doing, and that was just sort of like, all right, it's hard enough to try to come up with a band name for anything. Let's just call it, you know, let's just call it a day. But the live videos, it would have been totally weird if they were released under Blake and Pino or Pino and Blake or whatever, and not acknowledge the fact that, you know, Sam is just as much a contributor to this. So it's also nice that it's this thing that can grow.
What was the moment where there were the most amount of people together in the studio playing?
I think there was we had like Chris and Sam and Pino and I, and maybe Larry was there. And that would have been for Jerkel, or maybe Just Wrong. I can't remember. You know, there were most of the stuff that Chris plays on the record, I feel like was all stuff that was already recorded, like that Pino recorded at his house or something years before. But with the exception, there was a few days where Chris came in to play on stuff that we had made, you know, after starting to work on this record, play on top of it. Just Wrong would have been the first one we worked on at Sound City. And it was one of the first sessions we ever did there. And so Chris came in for that, but I know some of the other songs didn't exist yet, in their kind of like final state for him to play on. So he would have come back. And I think on one of those occasions, Sam was there. But most of this record, like I said, was done kind of piece by piece.
Would you say
while
that
trying to avoid that sound?
Yeah. Would you say this is beneficial to the end product, that you don't really think of the end product so much while working?
It can be. We just didn't really. I mean, like I said, this music is still so mysterious. I don't have a real. It's hard to define what the end product is, still to this day. But I think it can go both ways when you're working on a record. Like sometimes you can definitely oversaturate, or overcook something and overdevelop it. I think that's everybody knows that, and they're really cautious of it. And it's what makes the allure of, just going in and knocking it out in a week sound so refreshing. It's kind of like, in most cases, if you say that's the way you want to do a record, most people you talk to are probably going to go like, yeah, man, right on. Like to go the other route and say, I want to make a record and I want to spend like a good 3 months just kind of like considering every possible idea.
Yeah.
It's not as appealing, but it's what most people do, to be honest, even if they intend to go in and just bang it out. It's what happens, for better or worse. And I think it's just a good thing to develop that notion for everybody, that notion of like, at what point is this not getting better and better the more that I work on it? For us, we definitely pushed that limit a few times, and trying to like explore every possibility. Is there
songs that didn't get a place on the record? Is there still unreleased material? That's it, right?
I mean, they're not from this batch. Like I said, there's a song that we started working on. Not so much the recording of, but just been playing and getting together. And it's one of those songs where it's like for each melody, you've sort of got like 3 or 4 different accompaniment options that you could do, and you're kind of trying to figure out like, should we mix one of these, or should we make a section where it does this one time and does this the other? So just sorting through a lot of those decisions right now. That's sort of the state that it's in, but it really feels like a continuation of the process that evolved over the course of making Notes with Attachments.
Well, I can't wait to hold it in my hands. I've learned so much listening to your music, and looking forward to more of that.
Thank you so much, Pablo. I appreciate that.